Welcome to the Tuesday, February 14th regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan, sorry.
Here.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director Linney.
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
Director Coleman.
Yes, I am been informed that I need to read a statement both here in an open session, and it was sent to both Clifford Chan, Derek McDonald, and Andy Katz and Risha Cole on February 8th. And what the statement says is, at the conclusion of business today, I will step down as EBMUD Board President. I have concluded that the pain and anguish my wife and I have endured from multiple sources during recent interaction with the district makes the title and extra work required to serve as Board President not worth it. I'm sending this now so that the agenda for the board meeting on February 14th can include the election of a new board president.
We move to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments?
I do have one speaker card.
I'll make some.
She's not in the room, and then I have one online, so I'll take the one online and then I'll give you the speaker
Okay, let me
cards.
just make some brief instructions for commenters. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we will have you contact staff. The Secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The Secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded. We will move on to the first speaker in the room, Yvette Rivera.
Thank you. I provided documents this morning to you. I redacted the name of the employee that was in the photos. It's a janitorial RCO job site checklist. I gave it to you because I've spoken about the janitors not being recognized for what they do and how that could have been used as a minimum qualification for the grounds worker one. Last week I mentioned that Director Chan's response to Director McIntosh, General Manager's response to Director McIntosh's memo request did not answer questions or items that I brought up in that public meeting. And I've done a little research, and I will be presenting that research at the next HR legislative committee meeting. The blue card that I provided Director Katz is titled, do we have George Santos or Georgina Santos-like employees in positions of power at East Bay MUD? Who knows? I've asked General Counsel and East Bay MUD to provide employment records of people in high positions that work here at the district. And I've been told, I was provided maybe a resume. I asked for employment records. Now, I read in a deposition that Marguerite Young participated in that the General Counsel reports directly to the Board of Directors. I don't know if you're okay with General Counsel saying, not going to do it, but there is case law that says people discuss employment histories in parties. How can that be confidential? I asked for the employment records of Clifford Chan, David Briggs, Lourdes Matthews, Derek McDonald, Tony Montano, David Carlson, and Derry Moten, just to name a few. This afternoon, I'm going to be providing you documents. One of the documents is going to be Dolores Turner's a Dolores Turner tort complaint. And I say Dolores Turner because when she worked for the city of Emeryville, city of Emeryville was sued. Dolores Turner was a defendant. City of Emeryville lost over $4 million. And then East Bay MUD went ahead and hired her. I don't know what kind of vetting they did, but that document I'm going to provide to the board. I'm also going to be providing the Saji Pierce pretrial scheduling order and trial guidelines this afternoon. Gives everyone the schedule. The plaintiff's objections to evidence. And also, there are a couple of documents that I'm going to provide you this afternoon from the McIntosh case that I think are very important because it's relevant to what's happening now with the janitors. The janitors had to go to arbitration for, I want to say, popcorn, because we have 2 positions in grounds maintenance as a one, and the position was open to quite a few people, and over 300 people took a test. And this McIntosh case, I'm going to end right here. This McIntosh case talks about how the EEOC said testing procedures that were non-relevant to the job could be considered disparate treatment. That's all I have for right now, but I will be turning in all these documents in the afternoon. Thank you. I yield.
We have one more speaker, Madam Secretary.
Yes, we have one, Joe Pangilinan online. You should be able to unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the board and all those in attendance. My name is Joe Pangilinan, and I am the Chief Steward of AFSCME Local 444. The district has an entire public information department dedicated to getting the proper messaging out to the public and to district employees. I want to speak today about messaging that is being sent to employees by the actions and also the inaction of management. In November of 2022, I spoke here about the harassment and retaliation of 2 of my stewards. The manager of my stewards was sending a message through intimidation and inappropriate investigation that no one should challenge or question their authority. This included filing grievances. An investigation and disciplinary track proceeded, and one of my stewards received a notice of intent to suspend for 15 calendar days. We protested the use and citation of documents that the union was not given access to, and the notice of intent to suspend was reduced to 10 work days. This is only 1 day less than the previous discipline of 15 calendar days. A message was clearly being sent by the manager, and the message was, "You mess with the bull, you get the horns." To be clear, my stewards only performed lawful union activity, which did not sit well with management. During the preceding Skelly hearing, we presented the facts, and once again, what I call the machine could not be stopped. The Skelly officer, who should look at things with fresh eyes, still doled out a 5-day suspension. Once again, message received. No matter the facts of the situation, an EBMUD manager initiated the discipline, so it must be warranted. During the investigation and disciplinary hearings, I had hoped someone in the management chain of command would stop the machine against my steward. While I did have some hope, I decided to initiate a Public Employee Relations Board charge. The Public Employee Relations Board reviewed the facts and agreed the investigation and suspension for my steward was retaliatory, and during the investigation, there was interference with the union's representational rights. The question I have for the board is this: why the Public Employee Relations Board is able to see the retaliation and harassment, but no one at East Bay MUD can. No one in East Bay MUD is willing to stop the machine. The intimidation and harassment of my steward included statements like, termination was on the table. And this manager said this while knowing the employee's child was recently diagnosed with cancer, which would terminate their benefits. The message was sent to employees, East Bay MUD employees, is this: when a manager meets their key performance indicators, how they treat their employees to achieve those key performance indicators doesn't matter. The message being sent to East Bay MUD employees is that management and supervision can either be complicit in the wrong that is being done, or they can simply look the other way.
Joe, your time has expired.
Joe, if you could wrap up in a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, thanks.
It is time for you to send a clear message to all your employees. The message needs to be sent is that management and supervision is not above the law. The message that needs to be sent is that all employees, including management and supervision, shall be held accountable. The message that needs to be sent is that management and supervision at EBMUD shall treat their employees with respect and are not allowed to intimidate or bully anyone. I'll be emailing the entire board a one-page timeline of events pertaining to this case and also a copy of the PERB complaint. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Joe, this is Director Coleman. Thank you for the comments. If I would like to ask that from the general counsel or general manager, we receive a memo on this, especially since we're going to be getting something from Joe, but he's raised a lot of issues, and I would like to know exactly what they are and how they play out.
Yeah, I'll take a look at this. I believe we already provided the board an update on this when Joe first brought this up to give information, but let me see if this is the same issue, and I will respond and provide information to the board accordingly.
And if there's additional information provided to the board to get a staff response so that the board can consider that too.
Will do.
May I also ask, because I'm new, if there was an original memo sent out, it was before I was here, so please send that to me.
Will do.
Thank you.
We will now convene to
I
discuss.
do have another hand.
Okay,
for
we will
public
take
comment.
that speaker and then convene to closed session.
George Cleveland, you should be able to unmute and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Janetta. Just want to say that as the chief steward of ASME Local 2019, we fully support our sibling union with their concerns and what Mr. Pangilinan just brought. You know, it is the same issue that he mentioned a couple of months ago. The same manager has been a thorn in Local 2019 side. And, you know, something needs to be done. And what Joe said about shall treat with respect, it's actually must treat with respect because this is clearly not happening. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, George. We will now convene to discuss closed session items 1A through C and 2. We are scheduled to return for our regular meeting at 1:15 p.m. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 14th, 2023 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call.
I think the announcement has to be made before roll call.
Thank you. Report from closed session, February 14th.
No,
I see. All right.
Sorry.
Before we go to roll call, Director Coleman.
Thank you very much, Andy. As I stated before closed session, and I'll state again as to what I'm supposed to do, I sent an email on February 8th to Andy Katz, Derek McDonald, and Clifford Chan, and this is the message by email I sent for the public record. I have concluded that the pain and anguish my wife and I have endured from multiple sources during recent interactions with the district make the title and extra work required to serve as board president not worth it. I'm sending this now, again, this is on February 8th, so that the agenda for the board meeting today, February 14th, can include the election of a new board president. That concludes my comment.
Roll call.
Director Chan, Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Linney, Director McIntosh, Director Patterson, Director Young, Vice President Katz.
Present. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There is a report from closed session. The board met in closed session this morning to consider a request by the general counsel to authorize litigation in one matter. All directors were present at the closed session. The directors voted to authorize the general counsel to initiate litigation in the matter. The action, defendants, and other particulars will be disclosed upon inquiry once the action is formally commenced. There are no other announcements from closed session. We move to election of 2023 officers.
I move to nominate Andy Katz as board president.
I'll second that.
Seeing no other nominations, I will entertain a vote on the motion and second.
Move to close nominations?
Okay, we'll vote to close nominations first. All those in favor of voting to close nominations, please indicate with the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We'll move to the main motion on election of Andy Katz as president and Lisa McIntosh as vice president. All those in favor? No. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. All right, we'll vote on the motion as it was made, and
Thank you.
We'll take another motion about vice president after the vice president office is up. All those in favor of the motion, please say if you are in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries.
Okay.
We'll move to nominations for vice president. Okay, it's Lisa McIntosh has been nominated and seconded.
I'm just saying seconded by
Okay.
Bill Patterson.
Okay, seconded by Bill Patterson. And are there any further nominations or a motion to close nominations?
I'll move to close nominations.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close nominations. All those in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, abstain. Nominations are closed. All those in favor of the motion to elect Lisa McIntosh as vice president, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Motion carries. We have board officers for the remainder of 2023.
Congratulations, Andy.
Thank you. And I thank the board for your trust in me to continue serving as your president for the remainder of the year. I made a statement about supporting each other and moving forward in this important centennial year. Very much appreciate the collaboration in our morning's customer assistance program workshop. I really feel like the board is coming together for some common goals, and I look forward to working with you. Want to turn the floor over to Vice President McIntosh if you have any comments to make.
I'm honored to serve the district in any and all capacities, including this one. So, and I'm here to support you, Andy, in anything you might need, but the full board as well. So I look forward to working with everyone in this capacity, and I know we'll work well together. So thank you for your support.
Thank you. We move now to 2023 board assignment preferences for committees, joint powers, authorities, and associations. In anticipation of this, I did circulate actually, I should ask for clarification. Was a memo circulated to the
Yeah,
board?
it's on
didn't see anything.
it's in the packet, right behind the agenda.
Okay.
What?
Oh, it's in this packet.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
not before today.
I
Wait,
propose, because we did have this process, and given the two, given that what has traditionally happened, it may be quite simple to make an adjustment. I intend to vacate the Finance Committee while serving as board president, and Director Coleman recently vacated the Finance Committee to become board president. So it may be quite simple to simply modify the board committee assignments by replacing by removing by removing myself from the Finance Committee and adding Director Coleman to the Finance Committee. That's the one change that I am sure about. I will call on Director Coleman for additional.
Yeah, I would just ask that I also be removed from the Los Vaqueros Expansion Committee, JPA. It's taking a heck of a lot of time for me, and so I don't have the time. And I know that accordingly, on the JPA, it's allowed, if one agency so chooses, is to have a staff member participate in the place in the voting role, unless another board member wants it.
I'm the alternate, and I agree. It takes an inordinate amount of time. I mean, the meetings are 3-4 hours.
And they're several times a month.
Yeah.
So on that matter, if there's no board member interested in being
Looks
the
like Mike's smiling and raising his hand.
interested in being the primary for the Los Vaqueros, Mike Tognolini, per the JPA, would be our primary for the Los Vaqueros project.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we would not need to appoint a director for Mike Tognolini to serve in the director role, but Lisa McIntosh would remain the alternate?
Director McIntosh will remain the alternate
Yes.
for the Los Vaqueros, and since, I mean, unless there's a board member interested in being primary, Mike Tognolini will serve as our primary.
Wonderful.
President Kath, I'm actually on all of the committees, the planning, the ledge, human resources, the finance administration, and the sustainability. Well, not the sustainability, but I was just wondering if someone would want to take one of those committees. I heard that other people wanted to have those assignments.
Well, I love planning.
You do, okay? Sounds like that's a good.
I miss it already.
Okay,
We miss you.
all right. Okay, so is that agreeable between,
Swap.
okay, good.
And, John, you've been on Ledge HR previously.
I have. To be honest, I don't know who's on it right now, other than I think,
Yeah. I'm the chair, and April and Bill.
right, and so I don't know if, April, you're saying you'll want off a committee? Is that what you're saying?
I said, I was told that other people wanted some of these committee assignments, and so I am willing to do a trade.
Now you're down to 2, which is pretty much what everybody has.
Everybody has
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
pretty
Okay.
much.
So, I mean, what, if you really don't want it, I'll go to that as well. Put
Well,
it
no,
that way.
I mean, if you wanted it, that would be fine.
I've
but I'm
always,
good.
I've always enjoyed it. How's that? So
well-
I'll go to that if you're so comfortable with that. How's that?
I mean, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So can I clarify, the membership of we've been talking about the Legislative Human Resources Committee? Or the
Yes.
planning, okay. And the membership will be.
Planning too, right?
Yeah, planning.
Plan we've taken care of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've already done so. There's 2 committees on.
My understanding is Director McIntosh will replace Director Chan on planning, and then Director Coleman will replace Director Chan on Ledge HR.
Is that the correct understanding?
Yes.
Okay, all right, and just to wrap it up in the motion, those will be added to Director Coleman replacing Director Katz on Finance and Administration.
And then, Andy, did you intend to stay on sustainability?
I do, yes.
Okay.
And then also that Director Coleman will come off of Los Vaqueros, and it will be appointed to a staff, Mike Tognolini.
And I'll
And
continue as
Director
alternate.
McIntosh will continue as alternate. Thank you.
Okay, normally we would do these things, quietly with a memo, but I felt like it would be important to just have these assignments because committee meetings will happen before our next regular board meeting, so.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
And just
Thank
so
you.
I'm clear, Director Katz, you want to stay on sustainable energy. I know historically we haven't had the board president on a committee, but if you'd like to do that, we can.
The last time I served as board president, I did stay on
You stayed on the committee?
sustainability and
I
energy.
did as well.
But,
Okay,
but
we
we
can
should
do it.
It was
reassign,
an ad hoc.
but we should reassign the chair, since I
I've
believe.
been the chair.
Yeah, why don't we move the chair of sustainability energy to Director Young? To be
I didn't
chair.
think I lost it. I've been the chair. I think I would stay the chair is how it
Is that
goes,
news
right?
to you?
It had been moved to me, but we will move it back to Director Young. That's what I'm seeing needs to be cleaned up on
I
this
would like that.
assignment list. Are there any other changes that need to be proposed for a vote? Okay. Has it been moved?
Not yet.
I'll ask for a motion.
I'll move the item.
I'll second it.
Okay, been moved and seconded to make those changes to our committee assignments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? It carries. Thank you. We will next move to public comment.
You should have 2 speaker cards outside of an agenda item.
Okay. I have a card from Frank Millen.
January 24th, you all voted for a salary increase for yourselves. The vote was 5 yes, 1 abstention that seemed to indicate understanding and concurrence, and 1 no, John Coleman, just as you and I have done any number of times in the past, John. I come to you because the way that motion carried, or the way that thing went forward, I've laid out a packet for each of you, as well as General Counsel and General Manager. I initially communicated with the General Manager that looked to me like a retroactive application to implement an increase on February 1st that was violative of the MUD Act. I got a response back that said, well, no, not exactly. All of that is in your materials. So what I'm here to present to you is the following. The MUD Act is clear, no more than 5% a year. And yet, there was a retroactive calculation applied prospectively. Nowhere in the BD1, nowhere in the action item, nowhere in the item on the board. And yet, Director Katz made a motion to go forward with the item. Now, I submit to you, that item, as it was calculated, provides for an 11.9% increase on February 1 to your compensation because of the compounding factor. There's only one way for you to get there because the MUD Act is clear. If there was an operation activity that took place, then you could move from that activity on salary going forward. But 2021, there was a general consensus, see the minutes, folks, that said, we ain't doing nothing. 2022 never was agendized. And in the world of business, an operational activity takes place even when you're not doing one because that is an operational activity. That's well understood in the world of business. So I submit to you, you have 3 choices between now and March 1st. Choice 1 is to double down on what you did on January 24th. Choice 2 is to say, well, to get to what the number wound up to be, we have to treat 2021 as a silo, 2022 as a silo, make that increase with the retroactivity, make 2022 the compounding increase, so that you can then logically get to the increase of February 1, 2023 without violating the MUD Act. And that makes me entitled to retroactive pay of $1,559. It's all laid out there in the memo. Now I want you to consider the optics of what you all did. What the optics are, East Bay MUD Board of Directors votes to kick off the 100-year celebration of East Bay MUD by granting itself an 11.9% increase. That's what you did. So option 3 that's available for you, and you have another board meeting to review this, is to say, oops, we made a mistake. And board members have done that in the past, made a mistake and corrected it. And you can wipe out the 2021 silo and the 2022 silo and do 4.5% on February 1, 2023. I don't care which one you take because I would prefer the one that gives me a retroactive bump. And Director Katz, you made this work by your explanation just before the vote, when you said it would be a combined additive. It's right there on the tape. So folks, you've got some thinking to do because March 1st is your next payday. Are there any questions? Seeing none?
No questions, Bill?
Director Patterson?
Frank, I think you and I had a conversation once, and what the conversation was about is probably something that needs to be in consideration. As we talked about future boards, and we talked about this act of not capturing correctly could penalize and forever hold back future boards. This is the only way you can get advanced at East Bay MUD. So I just wanted to put that on the table to say that's one of the items that you should consider as you move on this.
Director Patterson, you and I had no conversation on this item.
Yeah, years ago.
So
I am talking about
board,
what
the
took
board is
place on
limited
January
to a
24th, sir.
the board is
No, no.
limited to a brief response, and I believe Director Patterson has given just a very
And I'm
brief
giving a response to that. There was no conversation on this item.
All right, so we would ask, let me just call Director Coleman for a question.
Well, what Mr. Frank Mellon has described, I think you did it pretty eloquently, Frank, is a legitimate issue. And I did see the email transmissions between you and Clifford Chan.
General Manager Chan, please. I did not communicate
No,
with...
Clifford Chan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I do agree with you, put it that way, that what we did, the action, even though I voted no, did talk about going retroactively. That's what we did. It was not any other verbiage to that effect. So personally, I would like to see you owed the amount of $1,559 for your term on the board, time on the board, sacrifice on the board during that period. And that's what I'm saying, and I would hope that this board can come to a resolution. If it's not the board, the general manager takes it into account.
This item is not on the agenda. We're dangerously in the territory of discussing the item.
With that, I think we should request for any memoranda that the general manager feels is appropriate to the member of the public and to the board in the appropriate format. And thank you, Director Mellon, for coming to speak with us.
I would add one thing for General Counsel. Upon receipt of the check of $1,559, less appropriate taxes, I would be willing to sign a release of all claims.
Thank you for coming to see us, Director
Happy
Mellon.
Valentine's Day, everybody.
How much is your
Happy Valentine's Day. Madam Secretary, you did mention that there were two comments, and I only have one for open session. I do have a comment that a card for Yvette Rivera that
Yes, that's the second one.
Same one is resubmitted. Okay,
No.
Yvette Rivera.
Thank you. That was really odd. Actually, I thought the board gave itself a 10% raise. Thanks for the clarification, and it seems like the matter was discussed in this meeting without it being on the agenda. I'm going to go ahead and move on to three things that I wanted to bring up. I did provide documents to the board at this meeting. I'll list that in a minute. I wanted to say at the 11 o'clock meeting, the title of my conversation was, do we have George Santos-like employees working in high office here at the East Bay MUD? Who knows? I asked for a public records request of employment records, and Derek McDonald, through his staff, said that's private employment records. I guess that decision was approved by the board since he reports directly to the board. The other item that I wanted to touch base on was the documents that I just gave you. The first one is the Saji Pierce Ariel Bland trial date document. The trial will be, per this document, starting on May 22nd, going through June the 9th. That's the first document. The second document is another Pierce Bland. It's in opposition to the district's request to omit evidence. The third and fourth documents are additional documents from the McIntosh Irving case. The fifth document is the document that Dolores Turner wrote telling this board through Alexander Coate in 2014 that my supervisory duties were going to be removed if I provided a classification study, or if I submitted a classification study, and it identified supervisory duties. The document that's behind that one is a tort complaint against Dolores Turner from the city of Emeryville. City of Emeryville lost over $4 million, and the district went ahead and hired her afterwards. Who knows what vetting they did? Maybe those applications were only privy to a couple of people and no vetting was done. I don't know. And the last document is the document I gave Director April Chan this morning, that listed the conclusions and recommendations of the Winners Group report. I'm gonna go ahead and talk more about that at the next HR committee meeting, and I'm really happy to hear that John Coleman is going to be on that committee because of his experience working in public service for the state of California and working here. So I look forward to that next meeting. I'm going to end this by saying what I think the pillars of DIO should be at East Bay MUD. Instead of having roundtables and, I'm just going to finish off, having roundtables and code switching workshops, the pillars should be transparency, allyship, accountability. Audre Lorde said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." What does it mean when the roots of racist patriarchy are used to examine the fruits of that same patriarchy? It means that only the most narrow perimeters of change are possible and allowable.
Thank you.
That's all I have. I yield.
Thank you. We move to the consent calendar. I should make sure to reaffirm the instruction for anybody who is online and wishes to make public comment. Please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments on Zoom?
There are currently no hands raised for public comment.
We will move to the consent calendar. Are there any comments about the consent calendar?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second.
I'd like to pull item 5.
Okay.
And the motion to pass all items except for item 5.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any hands for public comment? All right. We will move to a vote. All those in favor of the consent calendar as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries. Item number 5.
Thank you. I've asked item number 5 to be pulled, and I did ask Mr. Clifford Chan about this last night. It's $120,000 for some furnishings here in the administration boardroom. And I understand that we're required to have, that's for 82 items that.
I'm sorry, item 5 is about
Office equipment.
Office equipment, right. And what the purpose of the office equipment is for 82 fixed seating units. Huh?
I was looking at the wrong agenda.
Oh, okay. And 4 freestanding table arms for wheelchair accessible, which is required under the ADA. I have no problem with the ADA. To me, I guess the other 78 seats thereabouts, do we need them? One, and where are they going to be? I mean, I understand the ADA requirements. We have to do that. We should do that. But we're paying a lot for 82 other seats. Is it all those out in the audience, or what?
It's the seats in the boardroom, but Jimmy, would you like to answer the question?
Good afternoon, Director Coleman. Yes, the seats are the seats you see behind where people are sitting. We currently have 100 seats, and we're actually reducing the number down to 84 fixed seats plus 4 available for ADA purposes. And by doing that, we're allowing a little bit extra room and a little bit wider seats for that. The boardroom has had 100 seats since this building was in place. We are refurbishing the seats, and we figure that is the cheaper way to go. But it also, in terms of whether we need that many seats in the boardroom, We also, aside from the board meetings where we occasionally have had this boardroom full for certain meetings where items of interest have been there, we also utilize this room for other staff meetings, like in particular the emergency operations team that does have that many people, and we do fill the room for that.
So I didn't realize we had 100 seats in 1990 when the room was completed or thereabouts. We're now at 84. We're looking at going down. Do we need to do that, really? I mean, I understand the 4 ADA required seats, and certainly not going to run $120,000 to do that. But to me, the seats look pretty good. And there are times when the public comes that they have to stand in the very back, and we may have those times again in the future. And or we have to create an audio for out in the hall if people are doing that, or in a training room. I just have a problem spending that amount of money minus the required 4 seats.
Can
I ask a question related to that? So is the prime motivation to accommodate the ADA, or is it because the seats are getting worn out and we need to change it, or because we just, for some reason, decide we need fewer seats in here?
No, the prime reason is because the seats are getting worn out. They are being refurbished, and that is the primary reason for the activity. In conjunction with that, we are reducing the numbers to meet ADA requirements and to make the seats a little bit more comfortable.
And we're also doing work in the entire boardroom in the coming months too, right, Jimmy?
Yes, it is one of the elements of all the work that we're doing in the boardroom. And you know, one of the other components of this is we're also providing power to each of the seats for you know, charging and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the power and USB receptacles, I think, you know, will make, you know, being a member of the public at an East Bay Mud board meeting a luxury. But many people using those seats are members of our staff, and you know, being able to keep their devices charged will help encourage productivity for members of our staff who may not be participating in the item that is currently under consideration while waiting for their item to come up. Perhaps that's I can see some productivity benefits of that, and that explains the cost a bit more. You know, it is an interesting. You know, I am not caught up to speed on all of the plans for refurbishing the boardroom and the training room. I'm excited that we would be investing in refurbishments, but I don't think we've had a comprehensive presentation about everything that's planned. So that Director Coleman, what else would you like to say?
Well, maybe it'd be nice to know what the comprehensive plan is before we start spending over $100,000 and other costs as well associated with it. Yes, clearly there are things that need to be done to upgrade this boardroom. I don't deny that, but I do have a problem for that amount of cost and I've sat in the audience on other occasions, and the seats are, I thought, in pretty good shape. Maybe I have to be pointed out to the seats that aren't, but I just have a problem spending that kind of money minus the ADA requirements.
I'm refraining from commenting. I really hope that we are not about to enter a period of time where we're questioning every $100,000 decision that our staff, who we entrust with more than $1 billion, to second guess. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm just hoping I can get a comfortable chair here.
Amen.
Does it make any sense to have, I mean, you know, John, I think has a reasonable question, but I also think Marguerite's right. We got to be careful here about where we start going into. John, would it seem better if there was an opportunity to have a bigger picture presentation of
I think that would be great for all the board members, so we know what we're looking at, because I don't know, ultimately it could be over $1 million or whatever that we're spending. I doubt it, but I would like to know what we're doing and how it fits into the picture.
And it's a public room that shows us, for better or worse, to the public.
Are we at risk of losing the competitive bid, because of the amount of time that the price is held open for?
And maybe, Elizabeth, I see you're going to ask that question. I mean, we could, I think, resurrect. We did share an info memo about this, I think last year, to talk about the upgrades we're going to be making to the boardroom, because during that upgrade, for a few months, the board meetings are going to be in the TRC. So we can bring that memo back up and share it with the board members and say, here are all the things that we're doing. It also includes replacing these chairs as well, because we understand that those need replacement as well. But we can share that with the board again about our plans for the boardroom, but we did provide that information last year.
You remember that?
Our memories need to be refreshed.
Thanks.
Regarding to specifically the timing of the chairs, because we are planning these upgrades to take place over March and completing before May, and it's a sequence of various items, and the chairs happen to be a long lead item we had hoped to award today. As General Manager Chan mentioned, we will update the info memo about other work being planned, but among other things would be replacement of the worn carpet and some other your chairs and other replacements to fabric to renew the look of the boardroom and replace worn finishes.
I would just ask if we hold it over to the next meeting, get the memo and take a look at it. Can it be done that way and meet the timelines that you're working under?
Challenging because, again, we need to order the chairs. They need to be fabricated and brought in timing. So again, construction is supposed to start on March 1st. So ideally, we had hoped to be in the position of placing an order after the board's consideration.
I would move the item.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. I have one more question, mostly a recommendation. The standard for USB ports could be changing, between USB-A and USB-C, and it's hard for anybody to keep track. But I would highly recommend, before we make this major investment, that we just consider the trends of utilization and what our staff are using, what members of the public are using, and what our vendor is able to offer. And
How easy it is to switch things out when they do change.
That's why I asked the question before we make that investment. Yeah.
We will look into that. It is a power strip that is accessible underneath the chair that has both a power outlet and USB, but we'll see what options there are. The benefit is having the power outlet is somewhat robust long-term.
Yeah, it's something, some of my furniture equipped for USB-A is now requires an extra cable. So thanks for taking that into consideration. There's a motion on the floor.
And I make that motion with the understanding that we will be getting a memo as requested by Director Coleman.
Okay. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. We now move to our legislative report.
Yes, so we have Cassia Viatella here, our Manager of Legislative Affairs, to provide the update.
Good afternoon, President Katz and directors of the board. I'm pleased to be here today, and happy Valentine's Day. We did not have a committee meeting this morning, so what I'm going to go right into is the recommended action for a position on a measure. I am bringing to you ACA 1 by Assemblymember Aguiar Curry, and the position recommendation for you today. This recommendation from staff is to support the measure. It is a local government financing measure that would amend the Constitution, subject to approval by the voters, to lower the voter threshold for special taxes by cities, counties, and special districts from 2/3 to 55% of voters for those special taxes to pay for housing and infrastructure projects. And infrastructure projects includes drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. The bill was introduced in December, and it has two additional provisions that would benefit cities and counties. One would create an exception to the current 1% limit on property tax rate for taxes imposed to service bond indebtedness. And the other would allow cities and counties to incur bond indebtedness that exceeds the income and revenue received in that same year. This measure has been before you before in the past, several times actually. This author has brought it back, and we're bringing it to you because we do not have a position on it since we are at the start of a new legislative session and this has been reintroduced. The measure would benefit the district by creating a more viable avenue to obtain revenue for infrastructure projects than those that currently exist. So the decision before you today is to support the measure. Do you have any questions?
So there's not a slide, there's nothing in writing here.
Just the staff report.
This is the staff report that was presented to you.
I'm thinking of, we have slides normally.
We don't normally have slides for most bills, but.
We don't have a Ledge HR committee meeting. We do.
Oh,
And we
okay.
did not. So anyway.
Didn't have a litigation.
So, yeah, we don't have a Ledge HR committee recommendation on this, so, but does anybody member of the board have any questions or observations based on?
But we've previously supported, I mean, we have a track record of supporting other measures of this sort. I'm certainly in favor.
I'll move the
I'll
item.
move.
I'll second it then.
The motion's been moved and seconded to support ACA 1, and I was just, in reviewing this, I'm reading into the bill and understanding that the title of the bill is focused on affordable housing, but the text of the bill benefits EBMUD.
That's right. That's correct. It benefits public infrastructure projects, and included in the definition is drinking water and wastewater projects.
Right, yeah, and I think that's important for the public to know because affordable housing is an important issue. And it's hard to understand, how to help the public appreciate all of the public infrastructure that needs to operate better. Any further comment, Director Chan?
I was just wondering, so, I mean, could this go to the Ledge HR committee first and then come back to the board so we could get a recommendation?
I mean, if there are questions this is an opportunity to bring up issues. Again, this is something that the board has supported in the past.
6 times.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
certainly could do that, but I don't know if it would change the outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we had something that we needed board deliberation on, I'd be, open to it. I feel like what we've seen in some of this legislation before is things get chopped out or competing bills end up, going, and I think the earlier that we can make ourselves a stakeholder and advocate for keeping the things that are infrastructure that we might be sponsoring, the earlier we can identify ourselves as a supportive stakeholder, the faster we advocate for our interests. So I feel like that time sensitivity could be an issue.
Yeah, that's correct, President Katz. This was introduced in December. It's identical to the previous measures that were introduced. They didn't make it out of the legislature. This author has been committed to keep bringing this back, and so we're bringing it back because it would benefit the district if it were to pass this year.
Okay, I misunderstood what you said in the introduction, so yeah.
That's quite all right.
Thank you.
There's a motion. Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries.
Thank you. So in addition, in your report, I provided an update on the proposed 2023-24 budget. As I reported last month, the governor proposed a $297 billion budget, and there was a projected shortfall of $22.5 billion. Last month, we did not have the details. We hadn't had an opportunity to look through the budget. But right now, what the governor is proposing to close the gap through delaying of certain funding, making reductions in the budget and shifting funds, and then also having something called trigger reductions, which means by January 2024, if revenues increase, then they would put those amounts back into the budget. The budget did not, the governor's proposed budget did not put forward using reserves to cover that shortfall, so it's all going to be through efforts to sort of manage spending right now. It proposes to sustain key investments in its priorities, which include housing and homelessness, education, and climate change. And there were modest changes to the climate change budget, and those were mentioned in the report. Also, there are some new investments in urban flood risk levees and flood protection, as well as permitting new water supplies specifically focused on recycled water projects and direct potable reuse. The governor communicated that he also intends to make up this shortfall. They will continue to pursue federal funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And they also want to engage with the legislature in looking at a climate bond. And the legislature on the Assembly has just started to take up those discussions, and the associations have been having work group meetings to look at what some of those priorities may be, which we're participating in those processes. So there's not much more detail on the budget at this time. We will see that when budget trailer bills are introduced, which will happen over the next couple of months. And as those are forthcoming, we will provide updates as appropriate. So any questions about the budget? Okay.
I'd like to, I'd be interested in more detail about what program areas we're monitoring in the budget, and of those, what's going up, what's going down, probably more down in a year like this, and what are, so that we can just provide feedback on that advocacy. If there's any budget subcommittee hearings between now and then, I think we would trust the direction from the general manager about how to deal with those hearings over the next month. And I would like to refer for examination in the proposed budget. There is a housing incentive that helps affordable housing developers pay for the what we call the service capacity charge, and that's a relatively new program. It may be underutilized, and I fear that could expose it to cuts. So I'd like to hear about if it's proposed to remain, because I do believe it's helped us with challenges with our affordable housing partners. It goes through a different subcommittee and scope of issues than most of the water things. But thank you for the update, and I look forward to hearing more.
Certainly, President Katz will provide that update.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It's good to hear about what's happening in the legislature. Are there any other general matters to report about what's happening in the legislature?
Yeah, I'm happy to give a couple of other updates on the state side. Friday is the bill introduction deadline. So as of Friday, I was calculating the numbers. There were about 1,100 bills introduced. We'll probably see another 1,000 bills introduced. We are sorting through those, and we'll be bringing to the board, obviously, in the next couple of months, those which are appropriate for your consideration. I also want to thank you all for providing your availability with having meetings with our state delegation in March. We are working on scheduling those, and we will circle back with an information memo to provide you updates on that and what has been scheduled and some talking points for those meetings. So I look forward to attending those with you along with the general manager. And then on the federal side, I just wanted to remind folks they've gavelled in the 118th congressional session. The general manager and I traveled last week to meet with our delegation, and we communicated our priorities based on the federal initiative. There will be a board information board information memorandum will be provided to you in the coming weeks with more details on that. Right now, based on those conversations, we are unlikely to see any major legislation that will move because of the split Congress, but both the Republicans and the Democrats are likely to introduce some version of a water bill to address water issues across the West and California, but we don't see those moving. One of the things we also did discuss were opportunities for funding through the appropriations process. So that's sort of my overview on what's happening on the state and the federal side, and if you have any questions. Okay, hearing none. There is one last thing I just wanted to circle back on in response to Director McIntosh's question last month when I spoke about redistricting and the changing demographics of the California legislature. While I shared that there were a greater number of Latinos and women legislators after the fall election, I did not have the actual numbers. So I wanted to share that there are now 12 African American legislators, which represents about 10% of the legislature. There are 14 Asian Pacific Islander members, which is about 12%. And then there are 37 Latino legislators, and they make up about 30% of the legislature. Then there are 56 white Caucasian members, that's about 47%, and the rest are either mixed ethnicities or Native American. So that's a general overview.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Okay, I have nothing further unless you have questions for me.
Well, actually, a quick question. I know we are setting up the dates for visits in Sacramento. I did mention this to Clifford, well, I don't know, a month and a half ago or so. Those who've been on the board for some time will recall, we would go and have a lunch up at the Capitol, invite the members of the legislature, their staff, and the key staff on the committees we deal with. And at that point, only two people would speak usually, the president, general manager, and maybe somebody else on staff. Has that been explored? Because this is, a lot of the committees that we deal with, they're not in our legislative delegation. And we used to do this, and I don't think it violates the Brown Act, and it's an effective way to basically hit everybody at one time, besides individual meetings.
I did have a conversation with the general manager about doing this, Director Coleman. I think at this time right now, we're setting up these individual meetings. It's becoming a busy time of the year because they're starting budget hearings as well as they'll soon start policy hearings. And so I advised against doing a lunch at this moment. I do still have some concerns about Brown Act violations and perceptions of doing something like that. So it's not normally customary. Those kinds of events are done through the associations. CMUA just did something like that. And certainly, directors of boards are welcome to participate in those. But in this case, I think sort of the one-on-one meetings that we're scheduling with the members will really give you an opportunity to have a robust conversation with them about our priorities and what are their priorities.
Okay, I don't know about the Brown Act. We'd have to get clarification on that. I do know that Orange County Water, San Diego Water, and I believe Metropolitan, they schedule such meetings. And even when they're in Washington, D.C., they have lunches for the congressional delegation that they represent.
I appreciate that. Having previously worked at Metropolitan Water District, I'm familiar with the practice. We had a much larger board, and so we never ran afoul of those Brown Act violation issues. So in this circumstance, I think it may be a little bit different, but I'm certainly happy to follow up with General Counsel on that question.
My recollection from when we did those, it was quite a while ago. We weren't doing it up all the way through 2019. There were.
No, we didn't do that, haven't done them.
Well, you've been on the board.
No,
yeah.
I have not participated or there's not been anything like that.
Right, yeah, I think people really did like the giveaway of our water supply map with a laminated place card, but
Yes.
it was well attended by staff. It was usually not well attended by individual members of the legislature, and I think it becomes more complicated to do a lunch across the street. And among other complications with the swing space and changes there. So it's the engagement is the most important thing. So I think we have a great engagement program planned for members of our delegation, and I love it that we can say that we have a delegation because we serve such an important region. And but I do think Director Coleman makes an important point about thinking about, are there key members of the legislature who would want to hear from us even though they don't represent our customers? And if doing a few meetings along those lines, chairs of committees, members authoring important bills, if you think that hearing from elected members of a district like ours we would be the best messenger of certain matters, or if they're carrying legislation that it means that we're a really important stakeholder that's not adequately represented by you and your staff, that could be something to consider. But I'm not suggesting that we revive the investment in a program that might not actually result in a contact with the members. But staff are important to reach out to too, and if there are lead committee consultants that that are very interested in meeting with us, then that's something we could consider that as a secondary priority to meeting with our delegation members.
Certainly, President Katz. We'll look into that and see if there's some opportunities to slot some of those in to the meetings that we're having. I'll say right now, we've had pretty positive response from our delegation's office. But to your point, we do always run the risk that we may not get a member if they get called to a committee or some other meeting. So we do our best, but it's always, we have to be flexible and manage expectations.
Any other comments about legislative report? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We move to item number 9. I have some speaker cards for item 9.1. This is combined with 4 sub-items. I'll first turn it over to staff to present the overall item.
Thank you, President Katz. So as we've discussed at the infrastructure workshop last fall, we're making significant investments in our water treatment plants to address not only aging infrastructure, but also improve our resilience and reliability. Last year, the board awarded a project to upgrade a Rinda water treatment plant. Today, we have for your consideration contracts and agreements to upgrade Upper San Leandro and Sobrante water treatment plants. But the majority of the work will be focused on the maintenance and reliability upgrades at USL Water Treatment Plant. Jimmy Eloy, our Director of Engineering and Construction, has a brief presentation to go over the project elements.
Good afternoon, board members again. I am pleased to be here today to ask for your consideration for several contracts related to the Upper San Leandro Water Treatment Plant maintenance and reliability and the Sobrante Water Treatment Plant chemical safety improvements, as well as at USL. It's a mouthful. Okay. So I'm going to give you just kind of a brief overview of the project purpose and scope, and then talk a little bit about the contracts that we have up for consideration. We have 4 contracts. The one for the construction contract to Flatiron West. We have 2 consultant agreements for engineering services during construction. And then finally, one for some equipment purchases for the temporary control systems that we need to install while the control systems are being upgraded at both of those plants. And then finally, I'll summarize the requested actions. The main driver for this project is at the Upper San Leandro Water Treatment Plant. This plant was built in the 1920s and really is in need of some upgrades for reliability. And those reliability improvements come in 3 main areas. The first is we have some capacity limitations at these plants. One at the flocculation and set basins, and then just the general reclaimed solids handling system that basically limits the capacity of the plant to 45 MGD. The plant is actually rated for 60 MGD, but we cannot reliably treat that amount of water at the plant because of those capacity limitations. USL has become a plant that is increasingly being used, particularly in times of drought, because USL and Sobrante are the 2 treatment plants we have that are able to treat a wide variety of source water quality. And so it's become more important as our water supply sources have become more varied. There is also a fair amount of aging infrastructure at USL. So particularly the clear well, the chlorine contact basin, and the power system. We also have some seismic improvements that we want to make at the USL reservoir tower. And then finally, the third component of this is improving the chemical safety and reliability at USL and also at the Sobrante water treatment plant. This is an aerial overview of the USL water treatment plant. And I put this in here just to give you a sense of the scope of the work at USL. All of the areas that are highlighted and bounded in yellow outline are the areas where work will be occurring. And you can see from this diagram that we are touching almost every area of the plant that needs some kind of upgrade, whether it's to help with the capacity of the plant or aging infrastructure. So now what are the agreements before you this afternoon for consideration? As I mentioned, we have 4 contracts. The first, and I'll talk a little bit about the construction contract. I have a few more slides on that. But the construction contract is recommended to award to Flatiron West for the amount of $237 million. We also have 2 engineering services during construction contracts, one with Stantec Consulting Services for $8.3 million, and one with Delve Underground, Jacobs Associates doing business as Delve Underground. Those 2 engineering services agreements are for work that these consultants performed as part of the design of the project. I will mention that the majority of the work for the design of this project was performed by district staff. And so district staff will also be performing the engineering services during construction. So these 2 consultant agreements are for the work that these consultants performed for the work that they performed during the design phase. The last item is some equipment on control system cabinets that we need to install when we implement the temporary control systems at both USL and Sobrante. They need their own control cabinets because the permanent systems will still be there, and those cabinets will be used once the project is over. These temporary cabinets will only be in service when the temporary systems are in place, and once the project is over, those cabinets can be used at other areas and other treatment plants. Talking a little bit about the construction contract now. We got 2 bids for this contract, one from Flatiron West and the second from Shimmick CEC, a joint venture. Both bids that we received were over our engineer's estimate of $210 million. So our low bid from Flatiron West was about 12% over the engineer's estimate. Just for and part of the reason for the bids coming in over estimate are the current inflation climate. We have supply chain challenges, and also some labor shortages in some areas, particularly in trucking and also a little bit in electrical too. Just for comparison, we kind of surveyed other bids for large regional water treatment plant projects that have been awarded in other areas to other agencies, and they're kind of averaging about 16% over the engineer's estimate. So we're in a climate where we are seeing bids that are higher than the engineer's estimates, and our bids are kind of on the low end of that overage. So we feel we have a good set of bids for this project. I wanted to talk a little bit about the construction contract team that Flatiron has put together. This is the main contractor and the major subcontractors on the project. The subcontractors are required to be listed if they perform more than 0.5% of the job, and so that's what are listed here. There are a lot more subcontractors and suppliers who have smaller amounts on the job. Those subcontractors and suppliers are incorporated in the main contractor and the subs who are actually contracting with those particular vendors. Also on this chart, it's shown, I know the board has been interested in the union affiliations of each of the contractors and subcontractors, so we've outlined these here. If you add it all up, about 78% of the work that is being performed on this job is being performed by contractors or subcontractors who have who are signatory to various unions. The other thing I wanted to mention is we did, in order to bid on this process, on this project, we had a pre-qualification process. And that pre-qualification applied to 3 major areas. It applied to the general contractor, it applied to the electrical subcontractor, and it applied to the shoring subcontractor. This pre-qualification process is based on a model that's provided by the state, DIR, and they have a template that we followed. This has also been used by several other agencies. It includes 6 major elements. One is a review of the essential requirements, their licensure, insurance policies, and indemnification compliance. The recent project experience, including the firm as a whole and the construction managers that they would be providing on the job. And we look at the project cost and the size threshold and references that were provided. The fourth, I'm going to come back to the third and the fifth, looked at the history of disputes, and also they were required to sign an affidavit required to attest to the accuracy of their response. 2 elements of this pre-qualification process that are pretty important, and I know there's a letter that you have from the Northern California Electrical Construction Institute relating to responsiveness and responsibility for both Flatown, who is also one of the pre-qualified contractors, as well as Helix, who is one of the pre-qualified electrical subcontractors. The pre-qualification process included a review of the history of the business and their organizational performance. Flatown, on any of the contractors on the pre-qualified list were reviewed for debarment by the state of California, and also on a federal list of agencies. They did not appear on any of those lists, and we were looking at their performance over the last 5 years. The last component is the compliance with occupational safety and health laws, and we looked at this over the last 3 years. There are specific questions that are included in the pre-qualification template that they had to comply with, and both Flatiron and Helix were pre-qualified on this project. Just a brief review of what's included in our engineering services during construction agreements. Again, these are for consultants who are the engineers of record on certain aspects of the project. Stantec was for the chemical safety system improvements, and Delve Underground did the specialized shoring that we needed for the chlorine contact basin that is included as part of this project. Continuing with these firms during the construction phase is important because they provide continuity with the personnel who are familiar with the design and the specialty expertise that they bring to those particular areas. Engineering services during construction involves an on-site representative from these firms, and also they perform review of submittals and requests for information, and if there are any design changes that are necessary, they are also responsible for reviewing that. I do want to also mention that the Stantec contract includes a few other elements that we like to have for the completion of the project. Record drawings for both the USL and Sobrante chemical safety system improvements, and they will provide also some support during the testing and startup for those systems. And then finally, there are still 2 treatment plants where we need to finish the chemical safety improvements. So there's some money in there for as-needed design services for us to complete those design improvements at those treatment plants. I wanted to just kind of touch on the community outreach and our schedule update. We have spent a significant amount of time outreaching to the community and the neighborhood, and in particular the schools. We had a meeting on February the 3rd with several of the schools that are on the truck hauling routes that we anticipate will be used to at least to get their input on requirements for safety around those schools. We have a community meeting that will be scheduled in March, an open house in April, and both of these follow the plan that the same track that we used for the Orinda water treatment plant construction. We expect to issue a notice to the contractor in May and actually begin construction in July. This is a 3.5-year construction project and will be completed in winter of 2026. So this is my last slide. Just in summary, this is a significant project for the district, very high priority. We believe we have competitive bids that we received. We had the design for this took about 4 years, significant investment in the design and the community outreach. I would also mention that this is a project that was earmarked to receive federal community project grant funding in the amount of $3.5 million. And so with that, that concludes my presentation, and we are recommending award of the construction contract to Flatiron West, 2 engineering services agreements, one to Stantec and Delve Underground, and a purchase of control system cabinets from Honeywell. And that concludes my presentation. Glad to take any questions.
Start with questions. Doug?
Go ahead.
Do you anticipate any kind of neighbor concerns and things like that? Yeah. A lot of outreach seems like you maybe already have some sense of whether there'll be an issue or not.
We don't anticipate anything unusual. I think the concerns are the same as they are on most construction jobs: traffic, noise, and dust. I think are the main things. We did do a traffic control plan for all the haul routes on this job, and we have contacted the neighbors, and as I mentioned, particularly the schools on those routes. We had a meeting with them just over a week ago. So I think construction by its very nature is disruptive, but we don't anticipate anything unusual for this particular project.
All right, thank you.
And is there any issues of, basically it's happening at the same time that the Orinda project is happening, but 2 of our, big treatment plants undergoing, significant, is there, what's the, coordination or, concern, or, what are the potential things that you've looked at that, might interact with each other under certain conditions?
Yeah. So probably the most significant thing is the outages at both of the plants. Though, for some aspects of the work, we would need to shut down either all or parts of the plant. And so the Orinda project and the USL project have both been coordinated to make sure that the outages do not conflict. Basically, when Orinda is out, we have to have USL in service to be able to provide the water service to our customers. That's probably and it also applies the other way around, but the more significant aspect is when Orinda is out, we need to make sure USL is in service.
The other question I have is about the union, the construction contract team, specifically with regard to Helix, and understanding what their practices are with regard to beyond prevailing wage, but in terms of the kinds of benefits, training opportunities, apprenticeship, et cetera, diversity, et cetera, that company employs as compared with its union signatory counterparts, and whether Flatiron considered signatory contractors for the electrical subcontract work.
I think we do have members from Flatiron and Helix, and I will actually let them speak for themselves. But what I would say, we do require prevailing wages. We do enforce those and monitor and enforce those on all of our contracts, and we'll be doing the same same here. We do require the contracts documents. We do require all of our contractors to, meet the requirements for prevailing wages and apprenticeship and that sort of thing, and we hold them responsible for that. But I will let Flatiron and Helix speak for themselves on those.
I do want to just very, very briefly, before we start getting into further questions and discussion, this may be the first applicable item since the board amended our ethics policy to require disclosure of any ex parte communications on something that may be considered quasi-judicial, like what may be a bid protest. And so in the abundance of caution, I'm inviting members of the board to share any ex parte communications, and I have none to disclose either. So I just wanted to point that out. Director Patterson?
No. I'm pretty much up to date on this, but I keep following it closely because it has great implications in this widespread area that's served by this unit. So we have to keep a sharp focus. That's all. I think I've been pretty close to it.
I would like to ask, so we're receiving federal money on this project, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Combination.
And we had, earlier, the board had directed management, under previous managers, it was quite a while ago, to investigate, and with the goal of actually establishing principles for a project labor agreement on this project. Am I getting that history correct?
I don't think that's quite right. We did do a pilot for a project at the Chabot seismic upgrade. For 2016, I think, is when we awarded that. But I don't recall that there was a directed.
Okay, yeah, perhaps I'm mixing up the locations in the specific project, but the connection of federal money caused me to wonder that. It is, do we have, as a condition of receiving federal money, do we have any labor compliance obligations that go above and beyond state law?
Well, the federal government does have their own prevailing wage Davis-Bacon Act, which we need to comply with. There are, I think there are some other requirements that we have to comply with. We do have to do purchase American Iron and Steel. That is a requirement of the federal grant, so that is incorporated into the bid documents for the project. And those are the two main ones that I remember.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, Cliff. Okay, so with that, since there's no more questions for the staff presenting, we will take some public comment on the item. So I have several speaker cards. I will first call.
Just to let you know, President
We're not
Katz.
answering the question I asked.
Oh, excuse me, Director Young.
I asked questions that have not been answered. So I don't know if you're thinking that those get answered in public comment or.
My apologies. Please continue and answer the question. Sorry about
that. If I recall, those were the questions about
Helix, specifically.
Yes, I think I mentioned that I would let Helix speak for themselves on what their overall practices are. Our requirements are to make sure that they pay prevailing wages, which we monitor and enforce. And we do expect them to comply with state labor requirements for apprenticeship ratios and that sort of thing. But we do leave it, we do depend and rely on our contractors to follow that, and we make sure that they do.
So Director Young, we have 4 speaker cards from Flatiron and then 6 speaker cards from Helix. They've requested to speak in that order. the first 4 from Flatiron and then Helix.
Okay.
Would you prefer to?
That's fine.
Okay.
So
uh,
I just hope they address my questions and concerns.
But to be kind of reiterate what I heard, Director Young, what are you doing beyond prevailing wage? What other benefits do you provide? What training do you provide to staff? And what are you doing with respect to diversity?
Yeah, and I'll add voice at work.
And I will let you know, President Katz, that there is one hand raised for public comment online.
Okay. So yes, speakers are requested to answer the question posed by Director Young as you make your public comment. We'll take the online comment after these comments, since I already had these comments at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So first I will call Andrew Giacomini from representing Flatiron.
Thank you very much. Andrew Giacomini from Hanson Bridget. I'm counsel for Flatiron. I'll answer your question first to the extent that I can, Director Young, which is from Flatiron's perspective, because Helix was pre-qualified, it was Flatiron's understanding that those issues had been addressed by EBMUD and pre-qualifying Helix. Part of that pre-qualification was to evaluate the very things that you're asking. So when our client bid the project, we relied on that pre-qualified list to select Helix. There was one other bidder to Flatiron that was a union bidder, and the Helix bid provided more value to EBMUD, which is why Flatiron included Helix as its subcontractor, again relying on its pre-qualification. Helix will come up later and can answer more directly the questions that you asked about their practices. And from Flatiron's perspective, we are relying both on the pre-qualification and also our direct experience working with Helix on the Orinda project, where they're the existing subcontractor, and our good dealings with that subcontractor. I wanted to just address a couple of higher level issues with respect to the letter that you received, the letter of advisement. They were well addressed by Mr. Yolole's letter of February 7th, written in response, and I thought that was an appropriate response, especially with respect to the specifications that were identified and will be complied with both by Flatiron and by its subcontractors as required to be monitored under the contract. I wanted to make 2 other points. The first point is that in order to file a legal protest, you have to be an interested party. This letter is not a bid protest and can't be under the law. Even if it could be under the law, it had to be submitted earlier, and it wasn't. So in addition to the issues that were raised by your staff, as a matter of law, that's not an appropriate challenge to awarding the contract to Flatiron today, and we hope that you will. We have 4 speakers from Flatiron, but right now we're going to bring up 1 more, and then we have 2 others that could address any questions that came up in case the next speaker doesn't, and that is Sarah Tacker from Flatiron. But before I bring Sarah up, do you have any questions for me?
Not at this time. So for my ease of going through, will I call Sarah Tacker and then 1 other person, and then skip one of the remaining cards?
We would like to reserve Diego De Vega and David Worth, depending on if there's other comments that are made by public comment or otherwise where we felt like further information was required from Flatiron for your consideration. But otherwise, we won't have them go in the order we presented.
Okay, so
right?
thanks for clarifying that. I have the cards for Diego De Vega and David Worth, and I will hold those cards for a later request to speak, and then next I will call Sarah Tacker.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. My name is Sarah Tacker, and I'm Vice President and District Manager for Northern California for Flatiron West. Flatiron West appreciates its relationship with EBMUD, and we are pleased with the performance of our teams that work well together on our previous projects. As we've already heard, I do want you to know that the project will be constructed with approximately 80% union labor, with the remaining 20% approximately to be performed by Helix as our subcontractor. We've worked with Helix in the past, and they're currently our subcontractor on the Orinda water treatment facility.
In our previous workings with Helix, we believe that they do understand their obligations to pay prevailing wages and otherwise comply with the contract terms and labor compliance laws. We also understand our obligations to monitor Helix to that effect and abide by the terms of the contract. We value our relationship with East Bay Mud, and we look forward to the opportunity to work on the Upper San Leandro project. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I will call is Gladys Nagao from Helix Electric.
Good afternoon, President Katz and directors of the board, and happy Valentine's Day. Congratulations again, President Katz. My name is Gladys Nagao. I've been with Helix for 15 years. I'm a project exec with a company. I started as a project engineer. Helix has been providing me with training and advancement for 15 years. And I'm also, as a representative of Helix Electric, I am very aware of all the labor code requirements. And as we always do, we comply with all the federal, state, municipal, and any local labor laws applicable to prevailing wage projects. We also have some people here, more people here from Helix Electric. So I'll wrap it up and I'll give them a chance to talk more about this project.
The next speaker card I have is Victor Romero.
I'm actually going to change it up a little bit. I'm Brian Jordan. I'm
Okay.
We'd like to address the questions that were asked.
Okay. Yeah, Brian Jordan may speak next, and will Mr. Romero speak after you or deferred?
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Jordan. I'm Executive Vice President with Helix Electric. I wanted to speak a little bit to the questions that were asked earlier. We, as far as training goes, we utilize 2 apprenticeship programs, one with WECA, which is the Western Electrical Contractors Association, and the other is Associated Builders and Contractors. We source apprentices from both of them. We have in-house trade and call it management training that we have a very large and extensive learning and development program where, like Gladys referred to earlier, she's been through a lot of that training. It's very, very important to us. As far as our DEI initiatives, we have, it's been second nature to us since the company was founded in 1985 by an immigrant from Odessa, Ukraine, Gary Schechter. If you check today, I would say that we probably have over 50 different nationalities represented in our organization. It's something that's been in our DNA from the outset. What we love to do is build things. We have been in Northern California building projects for over 30 years, including industrial projects in Sacramento, Fresno. Our first project with East Bay Mud was a prime job we did at the main treatment plant from 1998 to 2001. We pride ourselves in the projects that we build and in the relationships that we create with customers, whether it's general contractors or owners. We love providing opportunities for our people, as Gladys talked about earlier. She started as a project engineer. She's been excelling in this type of work where she gains the trust of agency representatives and general contractors in solving problems and moving projects forward. Vic Romero is here, who has been with us for 15 years, started as an apprentice. He'll be the superintendent on the job. He prides himself in getting into projects, figuring things out, working with plant operators in order to optimize the operation of the plant from a completion standpoint and from a safety standpoint. We are an industry leader in safety. It's just the other day we had our monthly safety committee meeting where we go over all near misses and all incidents. It's attended by all executives in the organization. It's something that is vital to us, both in keeping our projects and our people safe, but also in having customers such as yourselves confident in our abilities to be able to do that. I'll take if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer further.
Thank you. We may have questions later. I also have a card from Victor Romero.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Victor Romero. I've been working with Helix for 15 years. I started as an apprentice in 2005. I've worked by, all I've ever gotten from Helix is growing. So I'm from apprentice, foreman, superintendent. To this point, I'm currently the superintendent that run the water treatment plant for them. One thing that we do strive on is safety. I've always felt that safety is the #1 thing with our company. And like Brian Jordan said, we do have meetings over safety, and we currently just had one. And then, I don't know what else to say, but I've always felt very safe in the Helix safety culture. So
I have a question for you.
Yes.
If someone has a concern
Mm-hmm.
on the job about safety, how is it handled specifically?
I request to them if they ever had a safety, that as far as being the superintendent, to bring it up to my attention. We'll go over it. I like to bring other people that are for it, like our safety manager. I'll give them a call, ask her how can we resolve the issue that they feel like they're have the question on, and then we'll go from there on.
And how's it documented?
We documented it. I documented it on paper.
And then up into the company, or how?
No, she keeps a record of that conversation with me, and we bring the person that had the issue with to, and we bring it up to their attention. So.
And then how does the company keep track of all of those concerns from work sites?
They have a.
I'm asking out into the.
Oh.
You may not have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So each month, as I talked about earlier, we have a senior safety committee meeting. Every one of these items that Vic described is put together in a log, and we have basically an Excel spreadsheet, but it documents whether it's a near miss, a recordable, involved live circuit, theft, involving a different subcontractor, and we will go over any items that we feel are significant to look at that will help us learn from what's transpired.
I mean, I am aware from the material that we received in our packet that you do have some history of things that didn't really go very well. What were the lessons learned from those judgments that were made and the violations that were, the fines that were issued and the practices that were called into question? And what did you change about them?
So what you may be referring to is the false allegations they received from the outside source. Those fines did not occur. Those were charges that were made a lot by the folks that wrote that letter, and then they get to refer to the charges as if somehow those are facts. So yes, we've had many safety incidents in the past, just like any contractor will have, and that was one of the main reasons we have that senior safety committee, so that we're a national contractor. Our sales are about $700 million a year. And when we have an incident, regardless of what it is, we want to get that word out throughout the organization so that we don't repeat those mistakes again.
Okay. And what's your KPI for injuries? OSHA.
So our OSHA total incident rate is right now is about 0.52.
Okay.
Our experience mod is under 0.9. We just had the safest year the company has ever had in 2022.
Thank you.
May I ask something? Just really quickly, a very simple question. So you are now working at our Orinda treatment plant?
Yes,
And how long has that been?
about a year.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
The next card I have is for Kyle Lamson.
Hello, I'm Kyle Lamson. I'm a second-year apprentice, contracted through WICA. Since I've been with Helix, it's been nothing but the best experience I've had. I'm actually coming from a union into a non-union, but with this being said, it's probably one of the best experiences I've had, especially safety-wise. We're really concerned about not only just for people on the job, but off the job like you guys, with protecting your guys' water and making sure that nothing gets into that. But other than that, in regards to the safety and what we do pre-task planning. Excuse me. We do pre-task plans every morning, as well as stretch and flex to ensure that we're all ready and lubed up and go for the day. Ladder inspections, and then after lunch we also again evaluate our PTPs and to ensure that if there's anything that has new or changed on the job, that it is addressed, and to make sure that it all goes as planned every day. So that's all I have to say. Or any questions?
What's your pension?
My pension right now, as a second year, it doesn't kick in until after my 2-1 class, but I believe it's like 3% or 5% that they add in or take from the check to go into.
That's a deferred comp, 401K. It's not a defined benefit pension.
Truthfully, I'm not too.
Brian? It's a defined benefit pension or a 401K? Defined benefit pension.
Any other questions?
It's been alleged in other circumstances that employees haven't always received meal and rest breaks. Do you feel like you have always been able to get a meal and rest break?
Absolutely, yeah, we get those, and they're very adamant that we do. If we don't, again, it's more of a write. You get a write-up, or even just being late back from your breaks and lunches. Like, they're really adamant on making sure that you get the time that you need, as well as time off if needed for other circumstances, regarding family or like court, anything like that. If you have any, I actually had my grandfather pass away, and they were more than willing to, allow me that time to go and visit family and do the things that I had to do. But meals and breaks, everything like that, it's the schedule. It's first break's at 9, then lunch is at 11:30, and then we get one more 10 at the end of the day. So total of 3 breaks.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody's day may be different.
Yeah.
But
Depending on where you start.
around halfway in the middle of each shift, you would expect a 10-minute uninterrupted rest break.
Yeah. So we get 2 10s and a 30 for lunch.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for confirming that. Next card I have is, yeah.
Oh, we have a speaker still?
There's 2 more speakers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We can reserve our time if you guys, if we've answered your questions, if you don't have any more, we can reserve until the end if there's more questions.
Yeah, the next 2 cards, just I should call them, is Robert Massey and Katie Ross.
Katie Ross.
Okay. So if there are no more questions and you're waiving your time.
I'll have a comment.
Okay, Director Coleman.
Having read this extensive BD1 and looking at,
We have one more public comment on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let that go first.
All right, so we're not on to discussion yet. I'm just going through public comment cards. So I've called all of the cards for Flatiron and Helix, and we don't have any further questions from board members right now from those speakers.
So Kelly A., you should be able to unmute Are you speaking on item 9.1 through 9.4?
Yeah, the water treatment plant.
Okay, your 3 minutes will start now.
Yeah, you know, I'm watching this, and it seems to be the entire discussion seems to be centered around political and labor relations issues, and these kind of very political questions. There's nothing in here that I can see on the slides about what is the unit cost of treating an acre-foot of water. You know, this thing is a chemical treatment plant. It is an engineering project, and there is no engineering cost basis here because you're probably getting a lot of money from the feds, you know, and you just kind of lost track of these things. You're more worried about, union labor negotiation issues. But, you know, in the International Journal of Project Management, I'll give you some quotes where they wrote about a certain project. In preparing the bid for a large water treatment facility, it was clear that let's see, we wrote an open-ended contract that gave us a lot of latitude regarding change orders and ultimately made our profit margins here rather than on the bid itself. You know, we're right now at the critical point where all of a sudden, early in the process, there's a definite wooing phase where we're trying to get the client to sign the contract. Everything is possible. All their concerns are minimized. We work very, very hard to get a solid working relationship with them. The minute the contract gets signed, and that's today, guys, boy, does the atmosphere change fast. Now the arguments start about contract language and their interpretations versus ours. Believe me, the honeymoon doesn't last long, exclamation point. So here we are today. I'd urge EBMUD to get your lawyers out there and look at that contract because that's all you're gonna have starting tomorrow. And I'd urge your project managers and your contract negotiators to figure out what is unit costs here. And get, on the next project, try to get some idea of how much money things cost on a unit basis. What are the financing, do the old business school things that you guys have completely forgotten about on this project. Thanks.
That concludes public comment. I have some comments, but I'll first call on Director Coleman.
Thank you, President Katz. I read through the BD1, it's extensive, and what I found amazing with the number of allegations and claims based as fact, some going before 1990 in this that we had in here. In terms of recent history, there's really not much. And if we had such a concern about these two, about the contract we're looking at today, we shouldn't have approved the contract for Renda, or they should have been raised then. They weren't. And I'm prepared to move the item. 9.1 through 9.4.
Been moved and seconded. I will just further comment that the compliance with the labor code is not political. It's a matter of individual rights. It's a matter of keeping workers safe, keeping workers fairly compensated, and I'm glad that we got responsive answers to our questions. I expect that all of our contractors will be in compliance with our staff's requests for certified payroll and will be in compliance with the Department of Industrial Relations schedule for what applicable crafts should be paid for the work that they're doing. And so those are requirements that this agency should take very seriously, that I as a board member take very seriously. And when I see some of the history that's put into the record of this item, it's concerning. And I appreciate that that they, in this record, that we only have a record of accusations. We don't have a record that shows of a long history of violations that were entered into an order by the Labor Commissioner or court or the NLRB. But the history of allegations is enough to raise eyebrows. It's enough to ask questions and to insist that when we go forward working with you, that we have compliance. These are rights and values that we take really seriously. That people have workplace safety taken into account, and that remains a top priority, that people are paid on time, that people are paid in accordance with the Department of Industrial Relations prevailing wage requirements, that additional federal requirements are complied with, and that when workers do choose to exercise their right to organize, that they're given that right, that there's no retaliation of any sort for exercising those rights, and that's the bottom line, and that is a matter of compliance. There's nothing above and beyond or political about that. That is non-negotiable. So we are expecting compliance with those rules, and I'm glad to hear and see a general sense of agreement with that kind of compliance. I will personally say that I would like to see more of our work, if not all of our work, going to union contractors. I appreciate that 80% of the subcontractors on this bid will be going to union labor, and I hope that workers at all of our contractors and subcontractors will consider unionizing if they're not unionized. And you know, I'm not going to raise any matters around project labor agreement in connection with this item because it's not part of the discussion, but it reminds me of the importance of that kind of policy to avoid these sorts of uncertainties. So those are my thoughts about this.
I would just echo President Katz's comments that when issues are raised to us, we must consider them. These issues were not brought to us in consideration of the Orinda project, and so it is highly appropriate to ask these questions and to consider the responses from the folks that we are working with now in Orinda. And if we vote in the affirmative today, we'll be working with at USL, and we do expect, in some of this material, I read a very adversarial relationship between the union and the company, and I don't find that productive. You didn't answer the voice at work question, and so I will take that as what it is. But I don't see an opportunity, and we don't have anyone speaking from NECA or IBEW here today, unfortunately. But I do want to delve further into the discussion about project labor and increasing union participation. I am happy that 80% of the work or thereabouts will be done union in this project. Yeah, we'll go from there.
Any further comments? We'll call a motion on. We'll call a vote on the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? And the motion carries. And for clarification, that was a vote approving items 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, and 9.4.
Correct.
Okay, everybody understands that? Thank you. All right, we will move on to item 10.
Thank you. So next we have a discussion on our preliminary water supply availability and deficiency report. Our water supply is in good condition following the late December and January storms. We're filing this report for the board to consider changes to our existing drought response actions before our final water supply availability and deficiency report is presented to the board at the second board meeting in April. Brad Ledesma is here. He's our manager of Water Resources Planning to make the presentation.
Good afternoon, President Katz and other members of the board. Happy Valentine's Day. We will start. So the purpose of the preliminary water supply availability and deficiency report is to provide the board with initial information on current water demands and total system storage, forecasted total system storage, supplemental water supplies moving into this year, and statewide conditions and regulations. That way, the board can consider that information ahead of time before the final report in April, if it so chooses to make changes to the drought management strategy. Before we jump into the numbers, we thought we would review the drought management plan that's in our urban water management plan. This graphic here shows our drought management plan. What I want to do is focus you in on the 475,000 acre foot number in red around the box. That is our drought trigger. So in total system storage, which is made up of our upcountry reservoirs and our East Bay reservoirs, is 475 or lower, that triggers our drought management strategy. Let's now take a look at our total system demands. So here's a graphic showing water demands over calendar year 2022 compared to calendar year 2020. 2020 being the dashed line and 2022 being the solid black line. And then the blue bars that you see there are the monthly savings our customers have achieved through conservation in response to calls from the board to go from voluntary 10% to mandatory 10% in April of last year. And you can see our customers have met that goal from June through December. Let's take a look at current water supply, starting with precipitation. Here's a graphic showing rainfall by month in the Mokelumne watershed using a 4-station average. You can see that as of February 8th, total rainfall is about 47.3 inches, most of that occurring in December and January. Very significant rainfall and precipitation. Give you an idea of that. Average rainfall is about 48 inches, so we received about an average amount of rainfall through the year yet, and we're not done yet. However, the Scripps forecast is showing that the next 7 days are going to be dry in February, and you can kind of see that in this graphic here. So we'll continue to monitor that.
I thought the weather forecast is calling for rain on Friday into Saturday.
There may be a little bit of rain, but it's not like what we've seen.
Significant.
Right.
Not significant.
If you look at the East Bay, precipitation is following a fairly similar pattern where we had significant rainfall in December and January and not as much rainfall in February. If you look at snow at Caples Lake, this is actually a picture that Director Briggs had mentioned at the last board meeting. This is a former retiree who provided this picture. This is over at Kirkwood, I believe. And this is a Caltrans snowplow, and you can get an idea of just how deep the snowdrift is up in the watershed. But down in the table at the bottom there, you can see that snow depth is 116 inches. It's almost 10 feet. 174% average. Caples Lake snow water content, also 189% of average, 42.3 inches. So snowpack's looking good. How about total system storage? So again, this is our Pardee and Comanche reservoirs and our East Bay reservoirs. What I want to draw your attention to is that second column down at the bottom where you can see it's 615,000 acre feet. That's well above the 475 number that I had mentioned earlier. What you can see is the percent of average for this date is 108%. We're about 80% capacity today. Let's take a look at forecasted total system storage. So on the left on this graphic is total system storage in thousands of acre feet. The black solid line there represents actual total system storage that we've tracked over the time. Each of those dashed lines with the various colors represents a different scenario that we've looked at, from drier, 99%, to very wet, 10%. What you can see is that end of September total system storage is forecasted to be 630,000 acre feet, regardless of those scenarios. And that's because there's been so much snowpack, so much rainfall, that we actually end up following the rule curves for our reservoirs. And so we have to be at 630,000 acre feet. So that's where we end up. So essentially storage is full. All of those 630,000 acre feet scenarios are well above the 475,000 acre foot action trigger. Because of that, we're not seeing a need for any transfer water or Central Valley Project water in 2023, so no supplemental supply need there. Now let's take a look at statewide conditions. So you got a graphic California here on the left showing the percent of normal of snow water equivalents. And you can see Central Sierra there. I'll draw your attention to that one because that's where our reservoirs are located, over 200%. If you look at the table in the upper right-hand corner, we've been tracking the snow water content. You can see it started off well in December at 100%, and now we're doing great. We're over 200%. If you look at storage reservoirs statewide, all that rain and precipitation, we're basically looking at average conditions, especially at Oroville, Shasta, but some of the reservoirs aren't quite there yet. But in general, storage is looking better than it did before. It's important to note, though, that there are emergency orders that were put in place by Governor Newsom, N722 last year, that implemented and resulted in several emergency drought regulations requiring stage 2. Those regulations in that order are still in effect. And in fact, Governor Newsom just signed a new order yesterday that reaffirmed that these emergency regulations remain in effect until his state agencies provide more information at the end of April. So there's still an opportunity for them to make changes later. So today we presented the preliminary water supply availability and deficiency report, and by motion, we're actually asking you to file that report. We will continue to monitor the state regulations, and there will be additional snow surveys and data collected in March and April, and then we'll bring to you a final water supply availability and deficiency report at the end of April. And so with that, I will open up for questions.
Pretty clear.
Very clear. Director Linney?
Back to the chart on the statewide conditions and regulations, current versus average, Northern California. I may have missed that one. Given all our water supply this year, or maybe it's my color blindness showing up again. So the line in the middle there is the average storage, right? Not the top of the
That's
bar.
correct.
Okay.
So the gray bar, the tallest bar that you see there represents the capacity of that reservoir.
That one's gray. The other one
The
looks like it's
shaded
maybe
bar
red.
represents where we're at as of February 8th, and then the red is the average for this date.
All right. So in some parts of the state, looks like
we're below that.
Northern parts, we're not even above though the average storage.
Correct.
And that's due to less water.
Less water,
Or more
dry.
releases in anticipation of all the snow, or
Some of these are snowpack driven reservoirs, but antecedent conditions leading into this, we're coming out of a large drought, and so even with all that rainfall, precipitation wise, it didn't fill these reservoirs up to average conditions.
Okay.
So it really has to do with the levels going into this year.
That's right. That's right.
A good way to look at it is we have a small bathtub to fill.
Yeah.
The other ones have a big bathtub to fill.
Okay, thank you for that.
And that leads us well into, any further comments before we lead into item number 11?
We have to approve the recommended action to file the report.
Action.
I don't believe we have any actions
not there
as
yet.
part of item 10, but those that we have we have a resolution prepared under item 11.
We do,
Okay.
but just for item 10, we should just move, as Director Coleman noted, we should move to file the report.
Okay, oh, that's correct. Is Director Coleman, are you moving?
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. So next is a resolution to adopt a series of actions to modify our drought response actions, considering the information that Brad just presented. And it's important to note, as Brad also noted, that the state's emergency drought regulations are still in effect. So if the board adopts this resolution, these actions will not go into effect until the state rescinds its emergency drought regulations or allows the regulations to expire in June. Mike Tognolini, Director of Water and Natural Resources, will provide the update.
Good afternoon, President Katz and members of the board. I'll just start with a reminder of the actions that this board took last April. At least some of those actions that we'll be talking about today. On April 26th, the board declared a water shortage emergency, declared a stage 2 drought with a mandatory district-wide water use reduction goal of 10%, adopted Section 28 of our district regulations, and affirmed as a part of that implementation of the district's excessive water use penalty ordinance. As we just heard from Brad Ledesma, projected total system storage at the end of September is going to be at 630,000 acre feet under almost any condition, including the 99% exceedance condition, essentially under any condition. And the projected total system storage is, of course, well above our 475,000 acre foot trigger for drought actions. As you've also heard, there are state drought regulations to consider. The current regulation applies to urban water suppliers, requires stage 2 drought measures stay in effect. It is set to expire currently on June 10th, unless it's rescinded earlier or extended beyond June 10th. And the district would in fact be violating this regulation if it moved immediately from the current stage 2 declaration. So the proposed action today under item 11 is to take the following 5 actions. Rescind the April 26th declaration of a water shortage emergency. Second, declare a stage 1 drought and declare a voluntary district-wide water use reduction goal voluntary 10%. 3, rescind section 28 of the district's regulations. 4, suspend implementation of the enforcement of the excessive use ordinance. And 5, direct the general manager to implement all of these measures within 30 days after the rescission, expiration, or material modification of the state regulation, which currently mandates a stage 2 drought measures. As for why a stage 1 and not a stage 0, I think part of the thinking there is that by the end of April, when we get back here to report for you all a final water supply availability and deficiency report, we'll be able to clearly state where the district is in terms of its water supply, but also where the state is in its actions and orders, and in that place be in a position to really recommend going from stage 1 to stage 0 or to remain at stage 1. But for today, the request would be to declare stage 1 voluntary 10%. And again, all of these actions to occur within 30 days of the state regulation being rescinded or expiring.
Mike, I'll have a quick question. I understand all the stages and we have to wait for the governor and the Water Resources Control Board and the various agencies. Does that mean that we cannot rescind section 28 today, even if we're in stage 2? And even though we've just approved our report on the water deficiency, that we're not going to be?
Yes, so part of being in stage 2 is to have section 28 in place. And section 28 in place also includes the excessive water use ordinance. So they're all linked together and required by the state.
Now, some agencies I know have gotten rid of their penalty ordinance because of their situation, or they never adopted a penalty ordinance because of their situation, even though the state had said that they should back in April or May of last year.
Yeah, there are different ways to comply with the law. Our agency has determined that our best way to comply with that law was to develop and implement the excessive water use ordinance.
But I'm asking, if we wanted to, we could today, if we so choose, or at a later date before April, May, whenever it is, suspend the implementation and enforcement of the district's excessive water use penalty ordinance, correct?
I don't believe we can. We would be in violation of state law if we did that.
You have to wait.
Yeah, we cannot, just based on our implementation of the excessive use. And I also say section 28, the state also adopted, I mean, most of the restrictions the state has mandated in all the customers, our section 28 pretty much, except for I think one exception, mirrors what the state's requiring anyway.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So if not any further questions, we'll
I just have
recommend
one
those
question about the within 30 days is what do you suspect it would take to actually do this once the governor changes the...
I suspect many of these we can do fairly quickly, but we want to give ourselves some time just to make sure that as we implement this, that we don't say the next day we're going to make all these changes, but just give us some time just for implementation. but we could probably do many of these, within that time frame, within a shorter time frame.
I'll move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I want to make sure that we are considering, if it's appropriate to consider item 12 in conjunction. I'm not sure if we were intending a conjoined presentation.
We have a couple slides, but we'll do that separate after this vote.
Okay, so yeah, before we vote, my intention in asking for this action at a prior meeting was to show our customers and the public that we are reserving our drought actions for when we are truly in drought. And it is interestingly complex in how we are only able to unwind in a certain pace in conjunction with the state, but we are doing everything we can to treat the emergency like an emergency and a wet year like a wet year. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor?
Director Katz, President Katz, we do have a hand raised for public comment.
Okay, please call the member of the public. You'll have 3 minutes.
Kelly A., you
Thank
should
you.
be able to unmute.
Hi, thank you. You notice that on this item, you have a very clearly defined procedure, and you're trying to remove all those excessive use penalty, legal violations, penalties on your largest customers. You're trying to remove them, and and you have a defined procedure for when and how you're going to end this stage 2 and go to stage 1 of a drought emergency. So obviously, this is all a good thing. So my question is, when it comes to coronavirus emergencies, how come you can't come up with a defined procedure, just like this one, where you look to some authority, you say when they declare the coronavirus emergency is over, you say what you're going to do to remove your coronavirus emergency, you say when those actions are going to be happening, you come up with a plan, you approve it run it through your board, and you get a plan in place for what to do for how to end this coronavirus emergency. It's just like what you're doing now with the drought emergency. It all requires planning and leadership and board approval, and none of that is happening when it comes to COVID measures, emergency measures that you have in place. Thanks.
So I'll just quickly remind the board that the board did rescind our district emergency on the COVID in December, and all the actions associated with that were shared with the board in December.
And I think what's really happening with this item is that we have a very specific language in the state's emergency order related to the drought that just limit local authority in specific ways that did not happen under the comparable COVID order at the state level.
Correct.
All those in favor of the motion to approve the resolution prepared for items 11.1 through 11.5?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Next, we have Sophia Scotti here to talk about suspension of the Stage 2 drought surcharge.
Good afternoon. So I'm here to tell you that our drought revenues, so July projected through the next 2 weeks, will be sufficient to pay for our actual drought costs, and so we'll go into that in a minute. The 8% drought surcharge, and so again, that's, as part of stage 2, commenced being shown on customer bills and collected as of July the 1st of last year, 2022. And at that time, we did put together kind of a small cost of service. We go through the adoption process for drought surcharges as part of the 218, but then put together a specific amount for the drought surcharge when the time comes based on the assumed costs and what we know at the time that happens. So that came to $31.4 million for supplemental supplies, and that was assumed to have been collected over a full fiscal year, so during the entirety of fiscal year 2023. What we know now is that lower supplemental supply has resulted in drought costs that are lower than budget. At this point, we can also tell you that when the surcharge was adopted, that included in that adoption was the ability to suspend or reduce it based on water supply conditions or changes in revenue requirements. So at this point, staff is recommending the suspension of the drought surcharge effective March 1, 2023. That gives time for staff to be able to unwind all of the things that need to be unwound to make that happen. And what we can tell you is, as of that date, that the drought surcharge revenue will be sufficient to cover both the supplemental supplies and the customer support and outreach costs. So again, the district can still remain under stage 2 drought to be consistent with state emergency regulations as needed, but because of the flexibility with the way that we have always adopted through the 218 process, the surcharges. So just a point, this will be prorated on bill, so if you get questions from the public, or if the public who is here with us today listening, it would continue to show on your bill as a drought surcharge amount, but obviously at a lower level, because as of March 1, it would be lifted should the board choose to do that. And these would go all the way through early May, depending on what people's bill cycle is, that 60-day cycle.
Will it itemize?
Yes.
The prorating?
It won't say prorated, but what we're suggesting, and we have suggested this to Public Affairs, is that in the note portion it says, note your drought surcharge may be prorated. So.
Right, or only applies through
February,
February 28th?
yes, you're
or...
right. Correct. That is correct. So in terms of the actual amounts that we're talking about for FY23, we can see here supplemental supply costs. We spent about $20.5 million and about $1 million on customer support and outreach for a total of $21.5. And our projections through Feb 28th come in at about $22 million. So, so we feel confident that we'll be fine. And that's all I have.
I'll move the item.
Second.
And the item is, to, as stated on the agenda, suspend implementation of the Stage 2 drought surcharge effective March 1st, 2023. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you. Just moving on to the General Manager's report. At the last board meeting, the board appointed an ad hoc committee for the district centennial celebration. The committee did meet last month and provided recommendations for several of our centennial activities. We have Kelly Zito, our Manager of Public Affairs, to provide that update.
All right. Good afternoon, board members. I am here to talk about the ad hoc committee discussion that we had just last month on January 30th, and talk a little bit about what some of the staff recommendations were based on the discussion that we had. Before I jump in, I want to just thank the ad hoc committee, first of all, for the thoughtful feedback. It was a really good discussion and gave us some really great ideas to implement going forward. And then also I want to thank staff who spent, we have about 100 staff working on this effort right now, and so they've really put in a lot of time and effort to bring us this far. Okay. So the ad hoc committee on January 30th was made up of Chair Patterson, and then we had directors Lisa McIntosh and Marguerite Young. Also part of the committee, we reviewed, the timeline of the project and key milestones, and then focused on ways to enhance visibility, increase outreach, and make sure that we're engaging our community. The recommendations from the committee centered mostly on kind of our digital assets, video advertising, and other tools, but also giveaways that we're going to be supplying, and the Centennial events, of which there are 2 main ones. So as a reminder, here is the Centennial timeline and key milestones. We have been working on this effort for more than a year now, and we have, done a number of things that you may see popping up more and more, including launching our logo and incorporating it into various tools and websites and things. We had our first water walk where we go out into the community, a place that has some historical tie to EBMUD, and talk about, the importance of the watershed. Clifford was able to give some historical context to a walkout at Lafayette, and it seemed like it went really well. This spring we are continuing our hard work on our 100th video, which will be a pretty brief 15-minute video, kind of capturing EBMUD's history, but also something that we can take out into the community and show before ward briefings, or during construction outreach and that kind of thing, to kind of give our communities a better sense of our work. We're launching a number of partnerships, and a number of those are tied to our community fair. And then later this year, we're going to be holding the summer employee picnic and unveil the AV lobby update. So, as I said, you know, our digital assets and logos are available now in lots of different ways. My background has a nice little 100 with the watershed picture behind it, and you know, people can put it into their signature lines and things like that. We've updated the website with a special, you know, Centennial microsite. And as I mentioned, we're working on the Centennial video and flip book, which will be kind of a, you know, digital historical book that'll cover, I think, around 30 pages or so, kind of hitting on key highlights from our history. You know, here the committee's recommendation was that we make sure that we include a recycled water topic for our Water Wednesday, to kind of deliver on that idea that, you know, we're not just celebrating our first 100 years, but, you know, looking ahead to the next 100 and new tools that we might be using around water supplies. And then another interesting idea was creating kind of a 3D watershed model of our, you know, of some of our lands, to kind of take people there virtually if they might not be able to visit in person. So the Centennial flipbook and video, as I mentioned, are underway. We're working with an outside firm on both of those. The video is going to be pretty tight at 15 minutes, and we're going to feature, you know, a mix of archival photos and films with interviews of, you know, current folks, and the committee's recommendation in terms of, you know, how we might, you know, have certain voices in the video, suggested that we have one current board member and one former board member. And so, you know, the idea was that we would have Director Patterson as the current board member be interviewed for the video, and we're working on scheduling all of those as we speak. And then the other board member would be a former board member, Helen Burke, who was the first woman named to the EBMUD board. So those were the key recommendations there. Centennial giveaways. So these are items that we hope to give out in the community at our community fair in May, and also, you know, possibly have more of for giveaways, you know, later to employees. You know, the idea is to just, you know, get our message out there to different folks who might not see it. You know, those Swedish towels are pretty cool. They're compostable. We thought that would be a fun one. And then, you know, a little wooden EBMUD truck would be a little bit of a souvenir. And so the committee recommended that we ensure that the bag giveaways, you know, where we'll have our 100 logo are durable, not that they're like the ones that fall apart one time after you use them. And then also consider some of the pollution prevention items, like the pan scrapers that wastewater uses, compost buckets, and maybe even some lanyards for EBMUD employees. For the ad campaign, our theme is 100 years of, and I think I shared this with you last time. You know, we're trying to make this one a little bit more kind of lighthearted or irreverent, but also kind of, you know, something that'll resonate with people. So, you know, 100 years of, you know, pasta nights, or, you know, clean babies, or your morning cup of coffee. And so we're working with a different firm on that campaign, and it'll be largely digital, but we'll also have some print assets as well. The committee recommendation was that we, you know, ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are integrated into all of that messaging, and that we have ads in multiple languages. So we're already, you know, at work on that, and so hopefully you will see the fruits of that a little later. Not in the presentation, though. A little later, in a few weeks, months. So Centennial events, the in real life events. So as I mentioned, we have the water walks that we're working on and scheduling. We're also hoping to have some later in the year, some facility tours, you know, holding that, you know, at specific facilities that we want to highlight. And our working idea was that we would have the board invited, of course, board member to the facilities in their ward so that they could participate. And then for the community fair in May 21st of 2023, where we're gonna, spotlight lots of our different programs, but also have outside folks come in. We're starting to get some traction on our sponsors for the event, and so we have folks like East Bay Clean Energy and others who are interested in sponsoring. And so the idea is, of course, that the board members would be invited to participate in this. And one of the ideas that we were tossing around that seemed to get some support was the idea of a booth for board members, so that board members could kind of rotate in and out, speak to people who come up to the booth, and we could kind of time it out depending on what people's schedules are. And then, of course, the employee retiree picnic in the summer. As I mentioned, the walks already. One of the recommendations that we got in terms of adding to the walks are some at Siesta Valley Skyline Garden, I think was one, and we're already working on that plan to do that tour. And then also another suggestion about interpretive signs at Lafayette, which we're actually in the middle of enhancing and redoing right now. So that aligned really nicely with where we were going on that. For the Centennial Community Fair, as I mentioned, sorry, I went over this a little early. We're hoping to make this a really fun, community event, having a kids zone where, kids can do hands-on things that are related to water, have musical performances from high schools, and others in the area. And again, we want to partner with, folks who are kind of aligned with our mission, including NGOs, some for-profit companies, and other community partners. And so we're trying to make this a parking-friendly event because Lake Temescal, where it's going to be, does not have a ton of parking. So we're working with BART to create a shuttle system to bring people back and forth. And also, you'll see in, I believe, the next one. So some of the recommendations for the fair centered around, outreaching to the Bicycle Coalition for bike parking, and I think we've already even done that. Ensuring that we're outreaching to all wards so that it's not just kind of focused in the area right around Oakland. So we're hoping that having different performances from community members will encourage participation in wards from all areas. And then engaging with Oakland schoolyards. BUSD has a great jazz program. I'm sure there are many others. So to the extent that any board members have ideas about local bands or local schools that might be a good fit for this event, we would love to hear them. Advertising the fair in multiple languages, definitely that's part of our plan. The other recommendation I mentioned earlier, the booth for board members, seemed like a good idea. We didn't get a lot of interest in the dunk tank idea.
Maybe if you put a bunch of ice in it or something, that would be particularly challenging.
It came up, but it quickly went away.
Are you volunteering?
I think that was your suggestion,
watch
Director McIntosh.
No, it was my suggestion.
I didn't
It was
want to
mine.
say.
It was my suggestion. Can't imagine Lisa making that suggestion.
And then the other item was, how to do more upcountry around the Centennial. And so I think the idea is that we're going to create a Centennial theme for the party barbecue later this year. And then also there was a suggestion about trying to do more Centennial signage at key East Bay MUD facilities. And so we're already doing that at Lafayette, where we're putting in some signage, but we're looking at some other sites where we might be able to put in some 100th signage as well.
Is that like more permanent signage or temporary signage?
Well, I think it would be permanent for this year. So I think after that we might, but again, those are nice, highly visible spaces. So what's to say we couldn't put, post-Centennial signage up there or change out our messages a little bit more. But, it's true. People do drive by our facilities and might not know what they are or get that connection.
We can make the 100th last digit into a 101.
There you go.
Well, another thing that people do is they leave the 100 up and they put a date,
Right. Yes. Yeah, to kind of keep it going. So, and then for the Centennial Employee Retiree Picnic that we're planning, I think right now we're looking at July or August at Lafayette. We had brought up the idea of food trucks, and there was support from the committee for food trucks because it just makes it a little easier, provides some variety, and kind of makes it a little easier for the food component. So next steps here, are very similar to the earlier one, which is, we're continuing to incorporate Centennial messages into our other outreach in, specifically budget and rates. Rolling out the logo and our key messages. We've got the water walks planned now for, I think, a couple months out. We are working on a plan for a media event tied to burying a time capsule. We're still trying to figure out all the logistics for that, but that's kind of another main piece. And then, of course, production for the flip book and the video go on, and I think that's really kicking into high gear here in the near term. And yeah, planning for the community fair and employee picnic later in the summer. So.
And this is all working within a budget that's been set out and saying,
Yep.
hey, we can do this because we can afford it, we can't do that because it just gets a little too crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a fairly tight budget. I know when we talked about this, the board wanted us to keep a fairly modest budget on this project.
You can always come back for more.
Yeah, the ad hoc committee, well, Bill might have something to say, but I actually was looking through do you have a thing of the sponsor deck? I was looking at the files in the OneDrive on that, and the thing that I didn't see is I know that, we're not having people pay us for sponsorships. The money's going to our Water Lifeline, and I didn't see that in the sponsor materials, so that I would not want, EBMUD raises whatever, $500,000 to pad their, whatever crazy thing people would come up with when we're really actually using it to fund our, customer assistance program.
Yeah, so the couple of local partners that we've developed an agreement with, so Drake's Brewing for the Centennial beer, and then Oaklandish for the t-shirts, and now we're also thinking of doing hats as well. We are signing an agreement with them where proceeds of the public sales of those go to the Water Lifeline. And then for the other sponsorships, a lot of it is, they're able to come to the community event and they get some visibility, but it does help offset the costs for the event.
So the sponsorships are just offsetting the cost of the day. There's not proceed.
I don't think the proceeds I'd have to go back and look, but I know that at least for the first two partners, we are making sure that proceeds from those sales go to it. I'll have to go back and look at the sponsorship agreement for the kind of the bigger section. I know that we also have been trying to engage with RCF and St. Vincent de Paul about having an actual booth there, for free, of course, to give people more opportunities to interact with them and
Right, and our
fund them.
NGOs and community orgs would not be charged either, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like we should say something like any proceeds over and above the cost of the event will go to benefit our Water Lifeline or,
Yeah,
something.
it is not our goal, of course, to make any kind of.
Sure, no, but I think we
trying
need to be somewhat explicit about that in some way.
One of the things that I think, everything tells a story, and this is our story. So we talk about both the good and the bad over 100 years. And those are starred with accomplishment. We turn tragedy into glory, even in a drought. And we did planning from that history that led to alternate water supplies, like Freeport, like the improved conditions around Pardee. All those things should be in our story as we go forward, and all of this is for the benefit of our constituents. And you see, we have come this far together, and you're writing the story.
Well, thank you. It is true that we're making many efforts to articulate our whole story. You know, sometimes the story isn't pretty, but we're trying to make sure that we do involve, you know, all aspects of, you know, our foundation and growth.
Somewhere along the line, we need to talk about staff sacrifices. Every time we had a drought or something that was headed for catastrophe, this staff helped turn it around into a plus. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize, that these have been good years for the investment that people have made in us as an agency. And unlike some of the cities and other constituents, we didn't go under and get a bailout from the state and all of that. We survived. And the staff helped lead us through all those. I just want to emphasize that.
Just two really quick logistical comments on the Centennial, the main Centennial event. The site is a great compromise between wanting to be centrally accessible to all of our customers and then the major urban center of where our customers are, and also be a site that emphasizes water and just integrates a major water feature, and if I'm not mistaken, does have a direct connection to our predecessor history. So that, you know, that all makes sense for the site. It comes with two big challenges. The one that you're already looking at, which is transportation and access. And my thought for you and the committee to continue to consider is just where the shuttle origin begin. Mostly thinking that the Rockridge station is convenient for anybody who's on the so-called yellow line, which would be helpful for East of Hills and Rockridge, MacArthur, or anybody from San Francisco who, you know, West Oakland or San Francisco who wants to join us. But for anybody who's on that north-south line, they might have to transfer, and BART schedules on the weekend are not the best, and we don't know how recovery is really going to go. So I would just consider looking at whether MacArthur is a better balance of just people being able to, you know, find the shuttle to be the most convenient. Certainly, Rockridge is closer from picking up, but when we look at total travel time, you know, just to take that into consideration, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, MacArthur has a better shuttle setup too
Yeah,
than
they've got that
Rockridge does.
dedicated
Yeah.
section. I've had to transfer at MacArthur many times.
People know how to, well, it wouldn't be transferring to another train, but I'm actually trying to help people avoid a transfer.
Yep.
So just want to think about that so that we are accessible as possible. The second question, and I think we can overcome this, is making sure that we have access for mobility impaired. Temescal Park, it's a beautiful place, but it can be perceived to be a little harder to access for mobility impaired. And so we can consider careful siting within the park for what we're planning, and consider, you know, so that people who are in differently accessible technologies just are able to get to essential places, and that we are integrating appropriate use of tools like a golf cart, you know, to help people access it equally. So just wanted to share those thoughts as we plan for an inclusive event. And I look forward to thinking about other smaller events that just help us accomplish the Centennial, and full appreciation for putting as much effort into the main event as we are. Any other comments about the Centennial report? Okay.
And finally, attached is the monthly report, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Looks like we do not have any further comments on the general manager's report. We will receive a report from this morning's planning committee meeting. Then I will report on this morning's customer assistance program workshop. Director Linney.
Yes. once again, I need to report. I haven't had to do that before lately. So this morning, we had three items on the agenda. We dropped the last one, so I'll report on the two. The first one was on the Green Gen pumped storage project. This is a project that we're taking a look at upstream from Pardee that would move water up and down to basically store energy and release that. At times, it still seems like it's in the early stages of development. The staff is keeping a close eye on it, particularly on the issues of water rights and changes in temperature that might come about from the operation of this. And so they're taking a close look at that. The second item was regulatory compliance. David Woodard gave us a thorough report on various regulatory issues that we've had in the last 6 months from July to December, and went through several reports for that and what we're doing to prevent it in the future and what has been done to report and to document the issues that were brought up.
I will report on this morning's workshop. Staff reviewed 2022 CAP activities, arrearage trends, and customer assistance strategies, as well as customer support program goals and proposed enhancements to address affordability for customers facing financial difficulties. We move now to other items for future consideration. Please submit items for future consideration to the General Manager. And now director comments. Are there any director comments?
I attended the first, we've had I guess this is the first meeting since our Lafayette Water Walk, which I would fully encourage board members to attend. One's in their ward. There was, I don't know, maybe 30 people, and it was a great day. People learned a lot. We learned Clifford's extensive knowledge of the history of East Bay mud and water in the East Bay in general. And then this last Saturday, I participated in our Rinda construction meet and greet, which was also, despite rather cool and damp, but not rainy weather, also well attended by Orinda residents who were impressed by the big machines, and I think also, especially the second group, it got a wide-ranging glimpse into East Bay mud. So that was another good event to attend.
Mr. President, over the last weekend in San Jose, California, at San Jose University, there was in the library on the 5th floor an exhibit for Chuck and Sophronia Alexander. Chuck Alexander was one of the gifted students that Tom Bradley and I put together the first chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi on San Jose State's campus. And he died, and they had an exhibit in the library which will go from February through March, showing his background and contributions. And then on Monday, they had the funeral. But that happened over last weekend, and I wanted to be sure and report on it because I think they got an award of some $9 million, and his son is asking me to be part of their celebration at San Jose State with a new facility that's being constructed on campus. That's my report.
Further comments? for director comments? Happy Valentine's Day. And before we consider adjournment, I would like to propose that we adjourn in memory of two remarkable public servants who passed away in between our last board meeting and today. The first is Councilmember Janet Abelson from El Cerrito, who was an avid conservationist, a very long-time serving member of the El Cerrito City Council. Janet Abelson attended almost, if not every one of my ward events. She was always there, always present, very engaged, and was so excited to take me on a tour of the city's new recycling center when it first emerged, and was somebody who really made a mark on the community and the city of El Cerrito. So she is someone who will be truly missed. Second is Alameda County Supervisor Richard Valle, a remarkable public servant who was on the city council in Union City, had started his own innovative recycling company prior to serving in elected office, and really took the social services mission of the county to heart. When I was ever present with him, I felt like he was always really there with you, was really somebody who listened and cared, and I propose that we adjourn in their memory. With that, we are adjourned.